Thank you. I appreciate it, and appreciate everybody being here. Thank you, and kudos to you for a lot of the work you did on Kerry's Law and the advocacy there that resulted in a very successful outcome from a legislative standpoint. So, thank you to you. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around. I know I'm kind of the pathway to drinks and whatever's next for you this evening, but I wanted to talk a little bit about a subject that was in part an afterthought to the deployment of text to 911. I'll give you a little bit of background on it. It's an active activity that we've been involved with. There was a Google Tech Fest just a few months ago, part of a DHS contract with IGES to deliver text-related translation standards. So what I'll do is give you a little bit of background. We'll talk about some of the standards, some of the proposed solutions, as well as some improvements that we identified, as well as kind of how natural language processing and AI fit in the public safety community. So really what our effort came out as a result of kind of a gap in the text to 911 standards, as well as industry efforts. So text to 911 is now universally deployed across the country. I don't know the number of PSAPs. You could actually look on the FCC registry to see the number that are deploying text to 911. In California, nearly half, if not more, of the PSAPs have delivered text to 911 to their citizens. But if you look at the numbers, approximately 20% of the U.S. population natively speaks another language other than English. Some may speak English but prefer to communicate in their native language. And certainly we're familiar with all the capabilities for voice to 911, language line, voyance, other related voice-related translation services. But what it left is a gap as a result of the 2014 notice, or pardon me, 2012 notice proposed rulemaking by the wireless carriers and the FCC, NENA and APCO, that led to text to 911, which was ultimately deployed in May of 2014. We started working with one of our customers, Greater Harris County, which is in Houston, Texas. They were, at that point, receiving text messages via 911 in a platform that we put in place integrated with the wireless carrier text control centers, or TCCs, and they identified a number of messages were coming in Spanish. As a result, they requested from us language translation. In fact, there was a fairly high-profile text session that came in of domestic violence. It was in Spanish. The text taker really had a difficult time in managing and ultimately reached out to somebody else to help with the translation. But they identified, hey, we need this capability. We looked at related services and determined that machine-to-machine translation was the only capability available at that time. We added an integration with Google Language, or Google Translate, and we started in early 2015 providing text language translation, both English and in Spanish, so that a text taker could identify the incoming messaging session, which I'll show you a little demo, and then they were able to start that translation, which provided side-by-side translation both for inbound as well as outbound messages. Kind of how we got here. As I mentioned in notice proposed rulemaking in 2012, leading to 2014 deployments by all the major wireless carriers for text to 911. But the overriding kind of industry standard for text to 911 was called ADIS standard J110. It does not really address text conversations not in English. If you look across the web or at some of the websites seen in ABCO, they talk about some of the limitations. One is multimedia, the other is language translation. So there really was also no well-established business model. There have been early efforts by Language Line and others to try to come up with a universal way to do language translation for text-based conversations. Talking to the wireless carriers and especially the text control centers, they really prioritized a number of other features, including next-gen, over language translation. So as a result, DHS and IGES, which is Industry Institute, they were looking at solutions and proposed to the TCCs as well as the industry, hey, let's come up with a way to do it. And that's how we got involved in the effort and came up with a couple of different ways and added some of our insights into the into the mix. But when I talk about text to 911, I'm not explicitly referring only to SMS, although that has been the experience. This could apply to, as Mark Morelli mentioned before, real-time text, other forms of text communication, social communication that ultimately the PSAPs want to receive. So just kind of looking at how we ultimately did it was essentially when a text conversation came in another language, and you can't see the initial message here, the call taker dispatcher is able to adjust or apply the language assist on the chat window. It does an automatic detection on the initial message. It determines that it wants to do a translation from Spanish to English, and thereafter, any message, these are of course outbound messages from the call taker to the wireless user, how can I help you? They're translated side by side. All that is stored from an audit perspective, and then we send the message back to the wireless user in those languages, and I'll show that as a demo. And then the individual is able to respond in their native language, in this case Spanish, and we then translate the message for the wireless user. And again, all this is still, again, best effort, machine-to-machine translation. We identify for the wireless user. We call this an assistant, not a formal translation like you would with LanguageLine. We also identified another kind of opportunity here. I think it's actually cutting off the left-hand side of the slide, so I'm sorry. But another kind of capability, which was what I call multilingual triage. And we deployed this for one of the major PSAPs where essentially they said, hey, we're not ready to do machine-to-machine language translation, but we at least want the capability, if we've identified messages come in another language, that whether it's our Spanish language call takers or even an English language call taker, could start using a toggle capability to ask questions in language. So where's your emergency? If they were to toggle to SP or Spanish, they could send that message out in a foreign language. So provided at least some triage capability for the wireless user to be able to communicate in their native language, and somebody within the PSAP to be able to at least use some quick capabilities to acquire information. Perhaps the only thing they could actually ascertain from the incoming message is that they want location, and that may be just one of the questions they ask, but they have the ability to do it without formal language translation. So we at the Google Tech Fest, what we did is we demonstrated the ability to do a language translation via LanguageLine. In this case, what we actually did is we set up a text conference call. So within our application, we set up a conference call to LanguageLine. There is a parallel voice conference call, which is important because essentially what you want to do is be able to have the dispatcher, the call taker, communicating directly with a language specialist. So what you essentially have going is a text conference call where they put in a conference code, be able to transfer it to LanguageLine. Somebody within LanguageLine is be able to send outbound messages or inbound messages, or at least review the conversation, provide the responses via that parallel voice call. Very similar to what's been done in other environments where they may have calls coming into 911 neutral or to police, and they're able to transfer it to a perhaps specialist in language within the PSAP itself, especially for large PSAPs, New York, Chicago, where they have very large, maybe Spanish-speaking populations or other populations. Similarly, they could have a specialist on duty who's able to then provide those level of responses. So that's how they've been able to do it, is using a conferencing capability. So what I was going to do is just do a quick demo of the web translation tool. And then, what I really want to do is provide you some feedback that we've seen in terms of how well the language translations work and perhaps an area of improvement. So what I'm going to do is open up the app right here. Again, this is our web portal-based app, and my phone is over there. It's a Verizon phone, and I have this Verizon app already queued up, which is a Verizon messenger. And I'm going to send a message here. Mi coche fue robado. My car was stolen. I'm going to send it in a foreign language. And what it will do, hopefully, all things go well. And I should admit, last year my demo was an abysmal failure. But hopefully it'll come in okay. It'll send an auto reply message back to the wireless user. It's taking a second, maybe my phone. Okay, it's been received. And you can see the text came in, and there was a browser notification as well, but I think I was covering it. And I've opened it up. Now I'm, kind of playing, call taker dispatcher. And you can see the message came in. The location here is simply a fixed location. Obviously, I didn't dial 911, so for privacy purposes, we've come up with a fictitious location. I could turn on the language assist here. and what it will do is it will attempt to do a language detection. So what it's done is it's translated my message, and now if I want to send a message out, what is the make, model, color, and license plates. I could send that message out. It will do the machine translation as well. You see that it's translated it, and now I could go back to my app, and what it's done is it's actually provided here, and again it's not well centered, but it's essentially provided the parallel English and Spanish, and then I could reply back, and hopefully we'll show that we'll come back to the call taker and provide it in that translation. So this is the kind of automated translation capability that's been used in a number of piece apps that are using our web application. But moreover, really this kind of leads ultimately by transferring to language line, if you wanted to get that live translation either as a verification capability or in lieu of automated translation, what you could get to. So the next question is, from an accuracy perspective, kind of what do we see? There's an independent analysis. It's actually been written up by George Rice and Red Flash. We collected about 5,000 messages, approximately 200 text calls over several years that we collected in our cloud environment. What was determined by Language Line, they actually did an accuracy analysis looking at not the accuracy of the language translation itself, but the quality of the translation, what it meant from a dispatchable perspective. Better than 50% accuracy, meaning based upon the context and what was in the message itself, there was enough information to dispatch or provide an immediate or real response. Now, the question is, why is it only 50%? We know that Google Translate and others are fairly accurate. And really a lot of it is attributed to the quality of inputs, the use of synonyms. So there are multiple words that may be treated as synonyms. Special characters are always not handled based upon handset, upon carrier, upon tower. So there are a number of factors that go into message coming in and not having the appropriate information. Throw in there acronyms and other inaccuracies and you result in something that's less than accurate. But that being said, a number of agencies have said that something is better than nothing, and having at least some additional information they could use for context purposes is better. So we see that the PSAP community is accepting even machine translated solutions that are considered best effort. But what it really led us to say is, hey, how could we continue to improve this process? And I think the answer lies somewhere in the use of artificial intelligence, and what I'm talking about is natural language processing. So in this case, I received that text message in the native language. I apply natural language processing and artificial intelligence to essentially determine what is the intent. Is there anything that could be better gleaned from that before I put it through the translation engine? So as an example here, and if you look at natural language processing in an intents dictionary, you have the who, the what, the where. So this is my father, had a heart attack, but in Spanish, properly translated, and essentially, we've then done the translation once you've ascertained the necessary components, both from a public safety perspective as well as just using AI on the native language to result in improvements. So, this is where we see maybe that next level of DHS study or others that may want to study how to use natural language processing and AI to ultimately not only improve the routability of a conversation, but to get to that point where you see better language translation. Shifting gears just a little bit, kind of brought us to another point, which is, yes, it's nice, we have this web-based application, we have some customers out there, but it leaves a much larger part of the market space that doesn't have any language translation capability. And there are a number of PSAPs around the country. I won't say they haven't done text because there's no language translation, but have been very hesitant to do text without language translation capability. And if you look at a number of the public safety agencies, they have solutions from providers that you're very well familiar with, whether it's Viper or Vesta, Intrado, or now part of Motorola. that do not have native language translation capabilities, and a number of other vendors. So really, we looked at and said, how could we come up with a solution that is completely independent of whatever communications gear exists within the PSAP? And we came across a capability that has been, fairly well used in the text to 911 space, and that is transfer. And on some of the TCCs, there's an ability to transfer a text call. It does come with its challenges, but ability to transfer a text call to another agency. So what we decided to do is, working with one of the TCCs, namely Intrado, came up with a capability so that PSAP could essentially use that transfer capability and not really transfer the conversation because it became more of a conference call, but include another 911 center. So essentially what you have is you have the original 911 center that received this message maybe in Spanish or another language and said, hey, I need a language translation assist. And what they did is they transferred or conferenced in another site, namely an automated language translation PSAP. So what we did is we built a language translation solution that was connected to the TCC that allowed for that conference calling as if they were talking a language line, but instead they're using an automated version. And what we did is side-by-side messaging. So as an example, somebody texts in, there's a message that comes in and they receive various messages, some of which are actually live messages from the PSAP itself, and others that are part of that automated language translation. So architecturally, not to show you an eye chart at this time of day, but essentially you have the text control center that's connected to us, and essentially you have a PSAP that wants to get a language translation. What they do is they would invoke that transfer capability from their PSAP. It comes into the automated language translation solution, and using both private messaging as well as just standard language translation, does that automated language translation and is able to send them back to that initial PSAP. What it does is it serves as machine language translation capability connected to a 911 center who may not have the existing CPE or equipment that's capable of doing that. I have a little video here. It's not easy to do that demo, so I'm going to just show the video. And it moves quickly, so I'm going to try to stop it as best as I can while it's going. So let me blow it up too. It'll make it easier for everybody. Let's see if this, oops, let me get rid of this. Oops, it's still going. So on the left-hand side, let me just stop it. So on the left-hand side here is actually, it's just a Google-connected phone, but it's a phone that's able to send messages into the 911 center. So this is the citizen or wireless user experience, and then this is the experience for the call taker and the PSAP. And essentially, they've received an incoming text call. The PSAP opens the text call, and you see them on the same chat window that I was using before, and they've now received the message. They can send out a message, which is essentially to add the PSAP. So here what's happened is they've sent an in-band comment, or they could do like refer to transfer to another agency, and they send a translation request to the TCC. And what that does is it invokes a conference call with the additional machine translation PSAP. And I'll keep going. So what's happened here is a dialogue was transferred to the translation PSAP. You can see that system message here. That's actually generated by the TCC or the Text Control Center. And then you see a series of conversations, which is basically the automated language translation PSAP starting to translate messages. So the individual wrote in, I have an accident with their car. It's getting translated, and you'll start seeing the conversation going through that continuous translation. The individual sends out a message. Let's see if I can find that here. Stand by for assistance. And what's happening is really the individual on the right-hand side is texting with the individual on the left-hand side. This individual is texting in Spanish. That's the call taker. And in the background, this automated language translation is doing the automated translations. So you can see here that the translation, is actually occurring in real time, but it's being done in the background. If you notice, we didn't turn on the language translation engine at all. It's actually being done as part of the conference bridge with the PSAP, which just kind of leads us to the broader capability where you're connected to a service, like the TCC or a selective router. Can you take advantage of some of the capabilities that exist for conference calls and transfers for the purpose of language translation, for the purpose of artificial intelligence, multimedia, and other types of routing where the native call handling application does not support it. So this is just a kind of quick sampling at this last minute of how you could provide services for those who are not native speakers of English and deliver something broader to the community. And all this brings me just to kind of this use of natural language processing and AI. One example here, what we did is we started collecting multimedia pictures from wireless users. We've been doing it in Chicago for a number of years in partnership with the OEMC, but this is just a sample where we ran it through a simple AI engine. We determined some of the intent of the call. So if you run this through even something simple like the Google AI engine, a picture, you could determine, hey, what's the probability of the content? And if you look at that AI, that API, there's actually a number of other things that come to bear. Is there nudity, adult content, violence, profanity, etc., related to that picture? That allows you to say, hey, we should circumvent sending this to a call taker or dispatcher and send it directly to a surveillance group or a detective. So there's a lot of cool kind of new capabilities that are leverageable even out of band from a 911 call. And this is actually a demo that we did at NENA this year. We're using location capabilities as well as AI to kind of help reroute calls. So a call comes into the PSAP, you determine, hey, there's a particular accident, and we want to send all the calls to a supervisor or a particular group. You could do that, and the same thing with even keywords. So keyword, accident, or keyword. I don't even want to, use them this day and age, but the kinds of tragedies that occur, you can start collecting all those within a certain group of individuals that are starting to manage those conversations. Provide a real-time response like, hey, we're aware of the incident in your area. Your call is being routed appropriately. So just some new things that we're starting to see in the areas of natural language processing, AI, whether it's embedded in a web app or integrated and connected to the text control center, some new things that are coming. So just kind of giving you a quick summary, trying to fit everything in the time. We've seen a number of PSAPs that have said, hey, in order to deploy text to 911, we need translation capability. The overriding language has been Spanish. We, like some others, have been working to qualify some of the other languages, and you see them around the country, common themes, whether it's Korean, Mandarin, Chinese, Arabic, and then you find communities that have large Hmong populations. So there's kind of a wide array of languages that are being requested from translation perspective outside of just Spanish. The difficulty with live language translation continues to be the business model. There's still only a handful of text messages coming into the text control centers and the PSAPs, and as a result, the traditional business models for language line and other live language translation solutions do not exist. Maybe in the future, but in the meantime, automated translation is really kind of where it's at least from this time. It's a mature technology in terms of translation, but applied to public safety and then using AI or natural language processing to continue to tighten it up seems to be one of the initiatives. And we see activities through the IAB and IGIS as well as DHS to continue looking at solutions that will evolve language translation. So with that, I appreciate everybody's time this afternoon. My email address is there, or if you have any questions or comments about this, feel free to let me know. I don't know if we have any more time. I think we're kind of at the end for questions, but I'm happy to take them or not take them. So.